So if we move on then to the next presentation, which is by Annette Annette Scott from PSNI. As you can see, from trauma to crime, adverse childhood experiences, and criminal behaviour. So the floor is yours, Annette.
Can you hear me okay? Yes?
Yes, we can, thanks.
Okay, no problem. Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be here. My name is Annette Currie. I'm a detective for the PSNI. I've 17 years service, so that's just a wee bit of my background. And today I'll be presenting my dissertation from trauma to crime, adverse childhood experiences, ACEs and criminal behaviour. The research explores how early childhood trauma, known as adverse childhood experiences or ACEs, can influence criminal behaviour later in life. I'll briefly cover why this matters in policing, the theory behind it, and my research findings, and what this means for practice. Next slide, please. So this topic is highly relevant to modern policing. Research shows that ACEs are extremely common among individuals in the criminal justice system. Many offenders have experienced trauma such as abuse, neglect, or domestic violence. We also see repeated police contact linked to unsolved trauma, particularly in domestic violence or abuse cases, which can become intergenerational. So rather than just responding to crime, this presents an opportunity for early intervention and prevention, which is a key shift in the policing strategy. Next slide, please. So I've just put up this slide just to show you all the different types of adverse childhood experiences and what they include. When I was doing my research, it was an absolute minefield, a rabbit hole I went down whenever I first started, and I decided to specifically just take two, and that was incarceration and domestic abuse, and focus on them solely. Next slide. So the aim of my research was to explore the link between ACEs and criminal behaviour. So as I said before, I focused on incarceration and domestic abuse victim and perpetrator. And the key question here was, how can trauma-informed responses reduce harm? This was important because it moves beyond identifying the problem and looks at more practical solutions. Next slide, please. So there's four key theories to understand how ACEs lead to crime. Firstly, there's a social learning theory. It suggested that individuals learn behaviour such as violence by observing it in the home. Secondly was the attachment theory. So it explained poor early relationships and how they can lead to difficulties with emotional regulation and trust. Thirdly, more commonly known would be the cycle of violence. It shows how abuse in childhood increases the likelihood of offending later in life. And finally, life course criminology, highlighting how early trauma can alter long-term life pathways, increasing the risk of criminal involvement. So together, these theories can help explain why ACEs are so strongly linked to crime. Next slide, please. Okay, so the findings, my findings show a strong and consistent relationship between ACEs and both incarceration and domestic abuse. So for the incarceration aspect, it showed that each additional ACE increased the likelihood of imprisonment. This was often linked to factors like school exclusion, substance misuse, and mental health issues. And women in custody were found to have particularly high levels of ACE exposures. There was like 50 to 70% reported histories of abuse. Violence can be normalised, and there's often an overlap between victims and perpetrators. So for the domestic abuse, there was a strong link between childhood abuse and later intimate partner violence. And this highlights how trauma just doesn't affect individuals, but it shapes relationships and behaviour across the lifespan. Next slide, please. I looked at two particular case studies for mine and to support these findings. There was the Birmingham Family Violence Project, and it looked at a whole family multi-agency approach. It incorporated ACE awareness into policing and reduced repeat domestic violence. And more commonly known was Operation Encompass. So the police notify schools after domestic abuse incidents, and this allowed immediate support for children and helps prevent long-term harm and future offending. Both examples that I used here showed that early trauma-informed intervention did work. Next slide, please. The findings have clear implications for policing. So ACE awareness can be improved, can improve risk assessment and decision making. A trauma-informed approach can reduce resistance from individuals and increase compliance. And it also improves victim safety and aligns with problem-solving policing models such as early intervention strategies. Essentially, it helps officers understand why behaviour is happening and not just to respond to it. Next slide, please. First, increased ACE-informed training. For the recommendations, I would recommend more ACE-informed training for officers. Secondly, maybe trauma-aware domestic abuse responses. Thirdly, stronger partnerships between police, schools and social services. I think this is already being implemented at the moment anyway. And finally, continued long-term evaluation for these interventions to measure effectiveness. Next, please. Next slide. Thank you. The key takeaway for me whenever I was doing this research was just that ACEs did strongly shape criminal pathways. Domestic abuse and incarceration are often preventable crimes. Trauma-informed policing led to better outcomes, and most importantly, early interventions can change lives and prevent future crime. I know within my years of policing, I've come across several years of this where you arrest someone, you bring them into custody, they break down in front of you, and they tell you a whole background of ACEs. They just domestic violence, drug use within the home, parents incarcerated. So I know many of you will probably have seen this in your everyday working aspect. So I found it really interesting to do. So that was my research there, and I specifically did domestic abuse and incarceration. So hopefully I've portrayed it okay to you, and I'll open the ground to questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much. If anyone's got any questions, if you could put it in the chat function, although there may be a slight problem, I think, with the chat function.
It's a Q&A function, Cole, that people need to use.
Sorry, the Q&A one, please.
Can I ask one, please? Can I just take?
Just go ahead.
I've got the advantage of being able to put my camera on and my mic on. I was in a really interesting talk about trauma-informed practice and being trauma-aware just generally. And I just wanted to get your view on your experience of what that training is like at the moment as an officer, because obviously you've sort of dipped your toe into that sort of broader world of it. And I guess you're going to say, like, you said there needs to be more. What would that look like, feel like for you in a sort of ideal world? How much would you get? What form would it take? Could you just tell us a little bit about your thoughts on that?
I've done the mental health awareness training, and there's like suicide awareness training. So myself personally, I've done various other training aspects as well, and delving a wee bit more into domestic abuse and how it can lead on to criminality. I just think it would be good if they could bring that out to other people. I think understanding why someone's in the situation they're in can lead to be more sympathetic with how you deal with a situation. I just know that they are trying, like the Operation Encompass itself has been rolled out through nursing hospitals and stuff. It was all been rolled out there last year. So I think through time we will see that changing the aspects. I'm hoping that it will get better outcomes with that, and we can work together as multi-agencies. I know we work very closely with social services, trying to safeguard and highlight aspects in domestic abuse cases. So that's already being implemented currently. So it's just to further strengthen the relationships with those people, I believe.
Amazing. Thanks very much for that.
Thanks for that, Annette. Just one question for you as well that's in the Q&A. Is there a particular race that could be targeted, i.e. if an offender has several they are experienced or have experienced, time resource allows to target only the top two, which would be the best, do you think?
I think really at the minute, just even going back to Currie's one there, the domestic abuse aspect is really rife at the moment, violence against women and children. I know education within the schools has currently been rolled out here locally to make more men and males aware of violence against women and children and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. So I think that's already being done at the moment, but there's no individual ACE. There's just so many. It's just trying to implement and figure out what it is wrong with the person. It's taking time to listen to them as well. So obviously, whenever you're dealing with someone, they can maybe highlight mental health issues, maybe drug issues, and then maybe pinpointing and showing them a direction to go to. But you find with a lot of these here, there's more than one ACE for each individual. It's not just one specific.
Thanks very much for that, Annette, and thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you. Good luck to everyone else.
Thank you.